Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to My Spiritual Money RX. This is your TV host, Vivian S. de Guzman, your number one money magnet activator. And we know in this show that money is actually a spiritual form of energy because we have use for money in our physical plane. Our emotional plane allows us to feel safe and secure when we have it. Mentally, we feel good when we have it, don't you? Right? And spiritually, it is a form of exchange for all of us business owners so that we can bring about our gifts and talents to the world and have that exchange in this physical plane. So today, we are actually going into the hot topic of money. We have invited a very special guest who is a part of my team. He is our Transformational Wellness International's finance expert, and he helps me so much with making sure that the containers where we're setting up for our clients are actually intact, right? That they don't have any holes, and that we're able to do our mission and vision in this planet with ease, grace, and flow. So I wanted to introduce to you, everyone, my financial officer, and his name is Dave Baldwin. Hello, Dave. How are you doing today?
Hi, Vivian. Great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And a lot of our viewers are business owners, and they are on the spiritual side, right? They wanted to really know a little bit more about money flow and how they can use their talents and services coupled with the money, right, in order to bring about their services and goods, right, into the world. So share with us a little bit of I know I met you through Amy Lancy, and I'm very grateful, right, for my copywriter and my sales team that introduced me to you because you're perfectly fit for the job. Like, you really love numbers, right?
Oh, I love numbers. Yes.
You
Numbers are
love
fun.
numbers. Right. So we're going to talk to our audience who's mostly business owners, right? Going into the six, maybe seven figures and more. So may I ask you this question? Number one is, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned about starting your own business so far?
Well, this may seem a little bit counterintuitive, especially when you talk about energy and all those kinds of things. But when people talk about thinking positive or positive thinking, and I always say that when it comes to finances and cash flow projections, positive thinking is not a good thing. In fact, positive thinking will very much work against you. And
Okay.
there's plenty of evidence to show that a lot of successful business owners, part of what makes them successful sustainably in the long term is their ability to think around corners and think about what might possibly go wrong, not from the standpoint of being afraid or being paranoid, but from a
Right.
practical standpoint of thinking, what do I need to do to prepare for those things? And by contrast, a lot of the unsuccessful businesses that I've read about and I've come across and interacted with that are everywhere is the tendency to bury your head in the sand and think, oh, I don't want to think about that. That's unpleasant, and hopefully that just won't happen. And I've learned that if you say, I hope that won't happen enough times, one of them is going to come back to get you. So
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, because we live in a world of polarity, right? There's positive and negative. And what
Hmm.
you're saying is, in order to be prepared, because sometimes the positive thinking is there, however, the timing is not there. And I've seen this a lot, right? In the energy world, people want to say they only think positive. Unfortunately, they're not seeing the other side of the coin, right?
Yes.
I've been there. I know how that feels. So I
Hmm.
understand. However, like you said, if you have the energetics of it, right, you kind of sense energy. And when you don't feel good, it's actually a way for you to look at something else aside from what you're thinking, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's if you're feeling that intuitive sense of dread or unpleasantness about something, especially if you think about your money and it evokes an unpleasant feeling, the question is why? And I think if you take an honest look at it, it may not necessarily be an easy process, but when you work through all of what there is to work through, you definitely, it's a weight off your shoulders, and then you can feel free to actually feel positive in a way that's genuine and authentic, and there's something to just be excited about. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you can't, ignoring problems doesn't make them go away, is the bottom line. So
I tried that technique in the past. You're absolutely right. It doesn't go away. Because like I've explained to the audience, money is a form of energy. And unfortunately, if we grew up in a household wherein they view, let's say, money, or our parents or brothers and sisters have viewed money negatively, right? We tend to assign meanings to it. And that's really what shapes your world. So when you have a lot of negative attitudes about it, what happens is it's either you become uncomfortable and you go, well, I guess I don't want to live my life like that. So I'm going to go the opposite way, which is the positivity that you were talking about. But then you ignore the other side. But we live in a world that has positive and negative. That's the reality of it. Right? So sometimes you go this way, good, and sometimes you go, the negative feelings are good indicators to look at something else aside from what you're looking at. So really that's a good advice. Thank you for that. So what are the important numbers, Dave, that a business needs to watch? So for example, if obviously we have different segments, we have people that are just starting a business. There are people that already have a business, but then they're not quite making money. And then there are those that are expanding, making 6, 7, 8 figures. Are there different stages? Like, what are they needing to watch out for? So that they
absolutely, yeah. And there are definitely some factors that change depending on what stage of business you're in, or what size of business, or the type of business. But I'll tell you that one thing right off the bat that's the same everywhere is cash flow. Cash flow is the basis. That's the lifeblood of every business. And if you don't know what your cash flow is, you better figure it out pretty quick. And it's very simple: is more money coming in or more money going out? And to kind of dovetail on cash flow, the other thing I always invite business owners to look at, especially in the startup phase, it's more critical, is that if you're cash flow negative, in other words, if you're bleeding money, you don't have as much revenue coming in as you need to cover your expenses, then you've got to figure out how much runway do I have, is the term we use, which essentially means how much longer is my cash reserve going to hold out before I've exhausted it and I run out of cash. If you don't know how long it's going to have to hold out, there's a lot of, you're obviously going to feel very anxious and feel a lot of doubt about everything. And so I always say you may not necessarily be able to do a whole lot about every single thing that's going on right now, but the first thing you can always do is get clear about those numbers. Get clear what your cash flow is, get clear how much runway you've got left, and then figure out, okay, now what do we got to do about it? Okay, I need to make $2,000 by the end of February. Okay, great. Let's come up with a plan. Let's figure out where that money is going to come from.
Right.
As you get bigger, a couple of the things that come into play, and this isn't necessarily relevant for every single business, but accounts receivable for a lot of businesses is a really important number that essentially reflects what you've sold, but you haven't gotten paid for it yet. And this is essentially the money that it's your money in somebody else's bank account, basically. And if your accounts receivable number starts to get too big and become, well, and let me back up a step. A large accounts receivable number in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. What becomes an issue is if you have an accounts receivable number that's old. So in other words, if you have people that owe invoices that are more than 60 to 90 days old, then the older those invoices get, the harder they become to collect on. And so you've essentially got a lot of money that you're expecting to collect, but it's not coming. And that's one thing that really the key to accounts receivable is staying on top of that on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, as you bill people and as you make those sales. The other, just a sec, Vivian, can you still hear me? Are we still coming through?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And,
I saw the screen change. I just wanted to make sure. So
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So Dave, let me pause you on that, just for people to digest a little bit of what you're saying, right? The reason for that is a lot of times when people have certain triggers about money, You notice I started speaking a little slower because people do have triggers when it comes to that word, MONEY, right?
Yep.
It's interesting that may be the lesson that they have to learn when they create a business. So in perspective, I just want to share with the audience, I look at a business as a baby, right? As a child. That when you decide to have a child, you have decided to take on another responsibility, correct? I think
Absolutely.
of it that way, right? So normally there's a mother, there's a father, and then there's a child, and the child needs food, clothing, and shelter. So when a business is born, there is this child that you need. A lot of people get married, have children, and then they don't really plan for what happens because if that was how they grew up in, right, then they just mimic that kind of pattern. And then they're like, oh, God will provide, it'll take care of itself. Have you seen that belief
Oh,
come
absolutely.
at
Yeah.
all?
And I think you made a really good analogy right there with a child, because you're not going to, if you have a baby, you're going to be thinking about, let's maybe we got to have food. We've got to have a place, a stable home for the child. We need diapers. And then going forward, we're thinking about the kid's education, saving money for college.
Yep.
And I think you're right. But with a business, people don't necessarily feel that same level of responsibility. And it can be a sad situation. I've heard what you've just described, where I've even spoken to people. I'm going back years now. I've run into a handful where, oh yeah, the money's coming. I have faith that it's coming. I don't know where it's coming from, but
The blind faith part
and
is
then
coming.
3 months later, I hear that somebody's getting evicted from their apartment or having their car
Oh,
repossessed, and
that's
it's
sad.
really unfortunate. But and this is kind of why I say positive thinking doesn't necessarily work in your favor if you really don't have a concrete plan for where that money is going to come from.
Right.
It's the key is don't be afraid to deal with the reality of it, because I'm finding that when you just get down to brass tacks and ask, okay, what do we need to do where is this money going to come from? What actions do I need to take?
Yep.
I know I find for myself, the more I'm taking action, the more empowered I feel about the situation.
Yeah,
And most situations are a lot less dreadful when you start doing something about them. So yeah,
yeah.
I've definitely seen that same situation.
Yes. And leading on to this next question of what have you found most consistently effective for finding customers? So obviously, when you're ready, you know how when you're ready, it just appears,
Yep.
literally. So what we're teaching you right now as a business owner is that if you actually prepare the container for the money cannot help but come to you. That's really the energetics of that, right? Because money is
Mhm.
energy. And if you yourself as a business owner don't know how to receive, or you don't have a container for, let's say, rain to fall, right? When rain falls, it just pours. It pours into all of us. Now, if you have a bucket, empty bucket where the water can just go into, do you notice that, oh, now you have a reserve for this rain, the extra water. Maybe you need extra water for something in the future, right? So that's what we were talking about when it comes to creating these money containers. Because if you don't have any container, which is in the business world or terminology, I see it as what are the packages that you offer, because you're inviting them into your container. Like in my
Yeah.
business, I have like a 5-figure, 6-figure, and 7-figure container, right? Like my Prosperity Mindset Bootcamp, my 90-day success, and then my Gold VIP. So that's kind of like how I created my container. So to give you a simplistic analogy of how do you actually create and receive money with ease, grace, and flow. So we want to
Well,
share that with the audience. There's such a thing. There is such a thing.
and I think what you said about containers is a great example of what I think of when I say that your actions reveal what your beliefs truly are. Because if I hear somebody says, "Oh, I know the customers are definitely coming," well, if I know that I'm definitely going to be getting customers, then I'm going to be preparing for those customers to show up. So I think the container, I think of what you just said as it's a classical marketing funnel, or however you want to define that. But the basic question is, how prepared are you if those customers show up? And this is one issue that can happen at the startup phase. It can also happen. One common place I see it a lot is with a service-based business. Is usually I see this happen when they're successful to a degree. And maybe let's say, for example, if you're a graphic designer and you're doing all the work by yourself and you start getting busier than you can handle, then the question is, at some point, you've got to hire somebody to help you, because as one person, you can only do so much by yourself. And I see a lot of businesses that never really get past that point. And it's an example where there's money containers of a package or a systematic way to deliver what you're doing. A lot of times people never create that. They just don't even give any thought to it or even recognize the need for it, because they just kind of wing it and go off the cuff. And if you're doing it all by yourself, you can get away with that. You can, or at least you can appear to for a while. And you're just kind of going off of your individual skills and your personality, your individual relationship with the customers. But as soon as you try to build a team, as soon as you try to bring somebody else in, then that all falls apart, right? Because they don't have your skills. Your team doesn't have the relationships with the customers that you have. You've been going off of what's all up in your head. It's not written down, and so that's kind of one of the different things that I see it has to be put into place. But as far as going back to your original question, what actually is the consistently effective for finding the customers?
Yes.
I mean, I think the big piece that I really like to emphasize the most there is trust, and to really focus on relationships and loyalty. I really believe that sales is 90% a game of relationships. And it's good salespeople really they build strong relationships, and they value those, they guard them with their life. And I think that systems play a role into this. Money containers definitely play a role here, because there's a relationship between trust and how prepared you are, that if somebody, for instance, starts to send you more business and refer their friends to you, they're implicitly trusting that you're going to be able to take care of those people, and that you have all the systems in place, and that you've got yourself organized to that degree. That's another one of those unfortunate things I can see when people grow beyond a certain point, is they just don't know how to manage the growth, and relationships get damaged because they're focused on, let's just get more volume of customers, but not really focusing on that trust asset.
Yes, definitely. And that's like a dance in itself, right? Because you know how some people would say, well, just because you had more money now you don't need me anymore, or you don't love me anymore. Again, like you said, it's a relationship thing. And all of the parameters, like the understandings from the beginning, that would be best, right? That would be ideal, that it's set up. And that's where contracts come in, right? Whatever's written, and both parties honor what's written. We can go on and on with just the relationship, because obviously even your relationship with money comes into play there. It's very, very interesting, because people tend to assign money relationships. Honestly, your money relationship is reflected in all of your relationships.
Absolutely. And a great, one of the other things that comes to mind there is, do you pay your vendors on time and pay them well? And because I've found that a lot of the struggling business owners that never grow, one characteristic they have is they're always trying to get everything cheap. They're the ones that don't pay, or and if it's a trust factor, right? Like if you're known as somebody that doesn't pay your bills, people aren't going to trust you. And and so that's you really can't have one without the other. It's water doesn't flow in just one direction; it flows in a circle. So yeah.
This is very interesting conversation, because I did find in energy work that money is in the physical plane, right? Like the physical exchange of the goods and services. It is in the emotional plane, because like you said, once the feelings get hurt, it seems like, especially with women, it seems like they don't want to deal with that person anymore. It becomes like a shield, so to speak. And also it's in the mental plane, right? Like what you think is really what you get. And then spiritually, the more, like you said, you're open to receiving and giving, and there's a flow, then that's spiritual. And then of course, God gives you more blessings, just because you're also open for business that way. Like if you show, like, yes, you're organized, you have a system, and people are taken care of, yes, you're blessed in many, many ways as well.
Yeah.
It's in everything. Unfortunately, or fortunately, for those who understand money is in everything. because it only exists here in this physical plane. However, people have interpretations of it. And so when they connect it to something spiritual or something mental or something emotional, well, there goes. There goes. Either the money goes out or goes in. That's how it is. And a lot of people have triggers about money, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why we're here for a reason, right? We're doing this show. That's because of that. Okay. So what is something that you find business owners often don't understand? They just don't get it. They want a business. They think business is going to make them a lot of money. It's either, do they not plan ahead, or do they just not have the skills? Like, what is it? Because you've been in that part of your department, right? Finance.
Yeah.
So prior to working with our company, you have worked with others.
Well,
What have you
it
found?
actually, the answer to that question really dovetails nicely with what you were just talking about as far as triggers. There's a really good book out there called The Power of Habit, which talks about the psychology of how the brain rewires itself when you get into certain habits and you do things over and over. And essentially, one of the things that they talk about is they calls it a cue. Or you can call it a trigger, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, there's always some kind of an external stimulus that sets a habit in motion. A lot of times it's unconscious. But
Right.
what people don't recognize about this as it relates to business is just how easy it is for otherwise rational, intelligent people to be swayed by their emotions in ways without even seeing it, because you're either making choices consciously or you're making choices unconsciously.
Right.
And as far as money is concerned, I always say, don't try to change your habits but instead focus on being conscious about what your habits are. And instead of trying to make different choices, focus on making conscious choices. And so the way that works in the money realm is, I always say, start by just watching your numbers like a hawk. I mean, right now I watch my cash flow like a hawk.
Mm-hmm.
I run cash flow forecasts, and I find that when I look at those numbers, the more frequently I look at those numbers, something really interesting starts to happen is that I start to make better choices on my own. Like my motivation to make those small decisions a little bit better just seems to happen more automatically, more authentically. You know, for one instance, I've always had to watch my tendency to just mindlessly eat snacks when it's not a good time to do it. And it'll make me groggy, it'll make me tired. And I'm always having to watch for that, right? I used to be overweight. I was over 100 pounds heavier. And I noticed that one of the things that happens is when the more closely I watch my numbers, the less temptation I have to eat snacks when it's not a planned meal or anything like that. It's a direct correlation. And I've learned that watching my numbers is actually a really essential habit on a number of realms. And also, in addition to money, the other thing I watch for now is tracking time. There's plenty of tools you can get. There's one that's called Toggle that I use. There's also T-Sheets is one that's pretty familiar. And there's a bunch of other ones. It's not necessarily about what software you use, but the idea is that by using time tracking software and you keep track of what you're spending your time on, you can go back and look at a report at the end of the day and say, oh, wow, I spent that much time on these different things. Or I spent 3.5 hours reading my emails. And again, it's not that you're trying to change your behavior directly, but you're becoming more conscious of those choices. And it's something you have to really experience before you can really see the difference that it makes. But the basic idea is that that habit, the deliberate choice to look at your numbers, look at those things that were not part of your habits before, it essentially starts interrupting the pattern of unconscious thinking and unconscious behavior that led to the old way it was. Because I'm a firm believer, you got to start somewhere simple, and that's the simplest place to start is just get clear about your numbers, and everything else will start to change. Maybe not overnight, but it will definitely happen.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we have a viewer question, I think, to spotlight right now. So let's do that first before we continue our conversation, okay? All right, so let's see. Oh, Amy says, what is your process for helping your clients figure out how to price their offers and packages?
All right, perfect. Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that you have to look at there. One is separating out when you look at your expenses, you've got your overhead expenses in your business, and that would be that, like, if you have an office, you may have software that you have to pay for every month. If you have any employees or contractors that you rely on, basically the overhead would be your fixed expenses that are the same or approximately the same every month, maybe some variation, but regardless of how slow or how busy you are, your overhead is what it is. And then you've got to look at your cost of goods sold. Sometimes people refer that as COGS for short, as you spell that out. And your cost of goods sold should be more when you get busier. So let's say, for example, you're running a bakery. The more cakes you sell, the more flour you're going to have to buy. So your COGS is going to be higher. It won't necessarily be easy to measure all the time, but you should see some correlation there. So my reason for bringing those up in the context of packaging and pricing is, if you don't know what your costs are, you don't know what to charge for your packages, right?
Yeah.
And so your overhead, you've got to think about from the standpoint of, let's say that I determine that I do a service and I charge $200 for the service. And by the time I pay a contractor to help me and pay for all my other cost of goods sold, let's say I make $50 on that $200 sale, and my overhead expense is $1,000 a month. Well, that means I have to sell 20 of those packages. I make $50 on each one to break even on that $1,000 before I actually start making money. And I always just say, the first thing you do, get clear what those numbers are, and make sure that you're factoring that in when you're building your packages. That's the simplest answer I can give right off the top. There's obviously a lot more that comes into it, like competitive research and what value is being delivered. But I always start with the cost and work out from there.
Got it. Yeah, and that's a very good question. And the way I look at that on my end is, I actually look at how much is really the basic expenses, right? Because I think in the past we're used to getting paid our per hour rate, right, as an employee. So it's a real big shift, a mindset of an employee to an entrepreneur completely. So
Yeah.
I think of it as it's like 50% of the cost goes to all the expenses, but 50% goes to me as the provider, if you're the
Yeah.
provider of the service. Because you can't, if you're used to getting paid $25 an hour, you can't really charge for the same service for $25 when you have your own business.
Nope.
Because you have other expenses to cover, like you're
Exactly.
saying,
Yeah.
like this, StreamYard, production, maybe you're doing marketing and you need to go out and drive your car and eat. Like, there's so many things, right? A business is, like I said, a baby. It's you have to take care of this child now with all its different needs. And it doesn't need one thing. It needs a lot of things, right? You remember, for those of you moms out there who raised a child, there's different things. Okay, so there's another question. It's a follow-up to the same question that he just answered. So let's do that. Do you think people are afraid of figuring out their cost? Wow, that's a very good question, right? Because part of it is the money, the emotional part related to the money. So on the energetic side, Amy, yes, I see that as it could be a barrier for some people to even look at the numbers, right? You
Yep.
told us this, Dave. People sometimes like, yeah, I'm going to have a customer, and then money comes in and they think they have it, but they really haven't taken care of the baby, the business.
Yep. No, I think absolutely, people are afraid of looking at their costs. They're afraid of looking at a lot of different things. And I guess there's an obvious side to it of the person that says, I just don't want to know. But then there's I think the unobvious sides to it might be, let's say I make a sale and I collect a check for $500 from a client. And the tendency, if you think like an employee where you get paid at the end of the week, is to think, oh, I've got $500 to spend now. But the business owner that has been in business any length of time realizes, no, this is the business's $500. And this isn't all straight profit. There's taxes, there's overhead. And, so there's a fear that is sometimes disguised as excitement or positive energy when you choose to only selectively look at the numbers that make you feel good, such as, collecting a check for a certain amount and not factoring in all the costs that go along with that. Or you might look at and say, oh, there's $3,000 in my bank account. I'm fine. But do you really know how long that $3,000 is going to last before it runs out? Oh, only 2 weeks. Well, I don't want to think about that. So yeah, people are definitely, there's a lot of fear with that, but I would say really the best antidote for the fear is to go back to what I said a minute ago of just keep getting clearer and clearer about the numbers.
Yeah, definitely. So that's our goal for you today, is to really just be okay, release all of those fears you're having right now, maybe fear of confrontation, right? But like you said, Dave, if you don't look at it, well, you don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have a rash. What's the rash? What are you talking about? So that's a form of denial, right? Or they just look away, hoping that everything will sort itself out. However, money is a physical reality. So then, yes, we do need to know what our numbers are. Okay, so I think we have one more viewer question and a few more comments. So this is good. What is your guidance for those who are currently in a corporate job and have an exit plan of 16 months to transition into entrepreneurship, like on tax deductions for necessary training, certification, investment, while still in a corporate job? Thank you.
Okay. On the tax side of it, I would have to defer that to a CPA. There's a lot of different complex rules that can come into play depending on the type of business and your individual situation there. But as far as I think, I love hearing a 16-month transition plan, because I think that's a very realistic and manageable timeline, especially for somebody that maybe is doing a business part-time and it's not at the point where it can pay all the bills just yet, but you can see the possibility that it might in 16 months. I think there's a lot that you can do there. I mean, I think the big thing to look at is, are there any potential conflicts of interest that might arise between the agreement you have with your current employer and doing a business at the same time? Some employers are not going to be okay with that. So depending on the individual situation, you might or might not be able to. But let's assume that that's not an issue for the sake of this question. So let's say you've got a side business that you do maybe in the evenings, on the weekends, and it's that there's no conflicts there. I think the first thing I would look at is, how much do you need to sell in that business every month in order for you to be able to pay yourself a salary and make a full-time living? Like, what are those numbers that you would need to be able to make? And then look at, how much time and cost would be required in order to be able to make that level of sales. So let's say, for instance, if you're making handmade products out of your house or something along those lines, or you're doing a service, like a freelance service, would you be able to do as much? Like, would you be able to make enough sales to do it full time? That's the first question. And sometimes that's a whole nother issue that has to be addressed. Like, you might need to buy equipment that you don't have, like in the manufacturing of product, especially if it's food product. There might be health code requirements, especially if you're shipping and packaging it, depending on if it's going to a different state. So then there may be additional money you have to spend to be compliant with all those different things. The bigger your business gets, the bigger an issue that kind of thing can become. Yeah. So to really tie all that together, and the short version is really to figure out the implications of what would it mean to be able to do that business full time, and what does that look like financially, logistically, and to start from there. But like everything else, I always start with the numbers. So the rest of it really depends on the specifics of the business, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I think even for me, as through this growth and development phase that I've experienced this last 2 years of my career or my business, right? It is the clarity. It's really the focus and the clarity that you give your business. Because if it's a hobby, and most people start a business like a hobby, unfortunately, right, Dave? Have you seen a lot of those? It's just like, well, hopefully it'll make me money so that I can just transition from this job to this business. Versus if you really put your attention to it, because it's a baby. Like, you can't neglect a child just because you're doing something else, because a life has been born. So I see it as another life, right? A business is another life. So if you really want, you can use this business technically to bring your purpose into the world. So if you really have a big life purpose and you want to make a difference, yes, a business is a great vehicle for this types of things. And you do learn more about yourself, your weaknesses and your strengths and limitations and everything else, because you are being stretched to grow and expand, right? In an employee setting, only one job. That's your
Yep.
job with lots of job descriptions. So when people go into business, I think they forget to write their job descriptions. And then they try to do it all when it's a job maybe for 4 or 6 people. And I realized that as I grew and expand, you can't be a control freak in every single thing. Because when you're going into a 7-figure business, you do need to delegate and release control of things that you're not good at.
Yep.
Just
And I think as far as, it's interesting though, this is the one chief difference between a business and a baby, is that a baby will grow inevitably into an adult under its own power, but your business will not. I mean, your business could just stay small forever if you don't deliberately put those things into place. And I think in terms of hiring and outsourcing, one of the things to always be thinking about is if you're just starting out, you may not be able to hire anybody today, but the first question to think of is, when I get busier, once I hit a certain number, who's the first person I'm going to hire, and in what specific area am I going to enlist somebody's help? So, yeah, and then there's the question of what would I outsource to another company versus what will I hire an employee that I would train in-house. So that's a whole nother ball of wax we can get into. But yeah, I think your general point, I definitely agree. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, delegating tasks and duties all together. So,
Yep.
all right. I think we have a few more comments, right? And questions. Let's see. Oh, you have to make your business expandable and collapsible. Yeah, that's Rich. Thank you, Rich, for that. Awesome. And anybody else have a question or a comment? You have to be open and accept it. Yes, and that's true. Depending also on if you're the you want to. We want to share with you, like, what can you do to grow this business? Like, open it up, grow it, right? And allow it to actually serve you instead of you serving your business. So I think, Dave, that's where they get stuck. A lot of people say, I'm going to open something up. I have my freedom of choice. I have this unlimited amount of money in their head, right? So that's the beginning. So the dream is there. And then when they have to execute all the different things, and then they realize, oh, it was easier to just collect a paycheck, right? Because that is pure profit. Right?
Oh yeah, if you're looking for the easy path, just get a job. That's definitely, yeah. Yeah.
If you want growth and expansion, business ownership might be the one for you, right?
Yeah.
And it would be good, like you said, instead of just jumping into the water, because most people do it that way. I did it that way initially. And there's a lot of lessons that go with the jumping. Let's just jump in and see what happens. Oh, Lord. That. So the money part, if you have a net, right, like a safety net to catch you, great. But what happens, I mean, majority of the people that you've talked to, like when you see them, right, can you kind of sense, is this person going to get it? Be successful, or are they not gonna get it? Like how
usually you usually have a sense, and that's one of the advantages of being able to look at somebody's numbers, is you get very quickly to the reality of what's actually going on in the business. That's one of the things that I learned from, I used to do marketing and copywriting years back, and I remember just the shift that happened when I got into finance was that I went from making an assessment based on what somebody told me and what story they gave me versus looking directly at the numbers. And the numbers usually tell a very different story. But yeah, I mean, I think you can usually get a pretty clear sense. And sometimes it changes. I mean, sometimes people start to recognize the need to do certain things, but it's always really the most exciting when I find somebody that's really eager to grow and really dive in, and they're ready to, they're committed. You can tell that they're eager to start doing what they need to do, and they're just looking for a little bit of guidance. And those are the ones that usually are really successful ultimately.
Right. And like I said, business ownership in a way is, I see it, well, I see everything as fun. For me, if it's not fun, I kind of don't want to be there, honestly, because if it's not making you happy, if it's sucking the life out of you, well, why have a business? Just think about it, right? Like if you have kids that suck the life out of you, a husband that sucks the life out of you, what do you need to change in order to actually make it differently, like experience a different kind of life? Those are like the deep questions I ask myself. So for me, if business is not fun, like, why am I doing this again? Like, that's my question. Like every single year when I reassess my business, actually those difficulties, right? Those challenges are the ones that make us shift our perspective. And it is.
Absolutely.
Whatever is your deepest value, you just get over the whatever excuses you have and just go for it. Like, do you really want it? Because maybe the answer is you don't want it. You don't want that kind of business. You don't want that big life. You don't want like bigger amounts of money, because what are you going to use it for? So I ask myself a lot of questions to get to the deep answers, because when you go deep, you finally realize why you're doing what you're doing.
No, I think you make a really good point about, I mean, a business that should absolutely be a source of joy. And if it's increasingly becoming not a source of joy, you definitely have to ask why. And I think that that can actually be an issue with growing businesses that move from one phase to the next. I've seen, this is part of one of the reasons why sometimes a one-person business struggles to become a 2 or 3 person business, or a 3 or 4 person business doesn't become a 10-person business, because they realize that once they get to that new scale, it's no longer a source of joy anymore. And I think you can work past that. In fact, that's partly why I would go back to the numbers and say, okay, what do we need to figure out here so that we can identify the source of it. But yeah, I definitely, I mean, I've never met anybody that was built a successful and thriving business that made them miserable every day. I'm not really sure it would be that successful, even if they did.
Well,
so,
I don't think employees or even the contractors are going to hang out with that business owner if you are miserable, right? Like if you have such negative energy, why be exposed to that toxicity every day? That's like, are you like wanting to drink poison, right? Every single day, that feels like that. Okay, so I think we have more questions, but then I just want to ask you this. So when you close your eye, Sarah says, I close my eyes and pretend my bills aren't there, they won't go away. This is a funny question. Okay, so any help for that audience, for that viewer we have?
I will say, if you can figure out, devise a way to make your bills magically go away, you'll make a lot of money selling that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, are you available to offer individual guidance, and how can you be reached? Okay,
absolutely, yes. So there's I think it's going to be popping up on the screen at some point. My website is dave-baldwin.com right there. And I'm happy to, my phone number, I can send that out. I'm sure there's a way we can do that, but it's 919-723-7916.
You can put that on MRI, our Facebook group, so people can connect, or an email would work too.
Yep, and also you can email. It's Dave at that email address, or just Dave at dave-baldwin.com. So yeah, if anybody that is looking to figure out how to apply these types of concepts to what you're building, I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Good. So I want to ask this question: what do you feel are some good habits for a business owner to put in place early on? Like maybe they're just starting, or maybe they already have some form of business. They're already starting to like speak out there, write a book, or maybe some website stuff, but then nothing's coming in. Like, what would be some good tips?
Well, I would say if you don't already have one, the first thing is set up a separate bank account for the money that's coming into your business. Kind of goes back to what you said about containers, right? So it's one of the things that part of it is logistical. I mean, I think your CPA is going to be really annoyed at the end of the year with your taxes if your money is all mixed up in one bank account. But also, I think psychologically there's a benefit too, because it's like if you don't create a separate bank account for your business, it's almost like you're not really that serious about it, and that's kind of the way that you're going to relate to it. So I think that's a big thing right there. Get some accounting software. I mean, QuickBooks is very simple to set up. Obviously, if it's not generating any cash flow yet, then there's no need to do that yet. But you can get, I would say, if you get QuickBooks software, make sure you get it through a bookkeeper. They can actually get you a discount beyond what you'll get if you pay for it on your own. Like I talked about time tracking, and this is even if you're not making any money yet, you can do this. The tools that I mentioned before, which is there's Toggl and T-Sheets. I personally use Toggl. There's a free version. It doesn't cost anything. And you'll be amazed what you start to realize when you just start getting in the habit of tracking what you spend your time on every day. That's a really important discipline to get into for a number of reasons that you'll start to see. I also look at, I'm in the habit of, I clear out my inbox every day, my email inbox. And believe me, I can tell you, I get a ton of email. I mean, I've actually got to monitor multiple inboxes for a couple of different clients. And I've found that the level of mental clutter that it creates, it used to create back when I'd open up my inbox and I'd see 65 messages sitting in there. I just find it makes a world of difference. I now have a system to make sure that I don't forget anything, that I know where to find all the information that I need, and I don't have to go digging through emails to figure that out. But I basically, it's religiously at the end of every day, every single inbox is empty down to zero. So that's, so those are just a couple of the things that come to mind.
Exactly, because obviously, like you said, because our brains, our eyes, our senses process this information. When you open an inbox and it's cluttered, yep, then that means it's going to float in your head, even if either you open it, you didn't open it. You know how you're like, I'm supposed to do that, but I haven't done it, that kind of thing. So
exactly.
Technically, because you started doing it and it's affected your life positively. Even for me, I start to declutter by the end of the year, and that itself is a big world of change, because now you're not stuck. The memories and the habits and information is not stuck in the past. That's how people think of me, like, how come you move so quickly? How come you think so fast? Is because the clutter in that area of my life is not there. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have any at all, because you have family, right? So then you just start to implement those little habits. Don't be too hard on yourself, you guys. One at a time, because money is in everything. Unfortunately, right? I wish you just think it's the dollar bill that you get. It's not. Money energetically is everywhere, in your emotions, in your mental state, in your spirituality. That's the reason why it kind of messes up with us sometimes. That is that. And we want to bring you these resources because we know if you do one little change every single month, I'm sure your life will change for the better. That's the goal of this TV show, is for you to establish better habits. You don't have to beat yourself up just because you're not doing it that way, right? We all have our different stories, so it's all good. It's all good. Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions? Just because this is such a hot topic. Oh, Shifra said great information. Thank you, Shifra, for tuning in. Wow. Looks like ooh, J-O-B, Journey of the Broke. Rich.
I haven't heard that one before. Yeah.
Or you spend, so that was good. Journey of the Broke. Thank you. So Dave is very intuitive with numbers. Yes. Well, that's why he's in my team. Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh. No, we love Dave. Teddy says, very helpful information. Thank you. I've started interviewing bookkeepers, but I'm so organized. Oh, Teddy, I think you're going to have fun with Dave, because he's really going to put you in the right lane. So you're so organized. You keep on thinking you can do bookkeeping myself if I know what the expectation is. Okay, let me share something about this, Teddy, okay? What I've learned is, really, if you think about the different jobs that you hold in your business, right? So we have to do the production, obviously. So if you're doing the treatment, you're doing the speaking, that's part of your job, right? Like as a production to bring people in. You could be doing marketing, that's another job. You could be doing sales, that's another job. You could be doing some, the bookkeeping side, right? That's another job. And then you could be doing some philanthropy, right? Like giving money back to the community, charity, things like that. There's so many parts of our business, or we could be doing the management part of the business. So if you think of yourself when you were an employee and somebody's responsible for all those, that's why you're just the employee of that with a particular job title. That's you get money for that. So now as a business owner, you're supposed to do 6 jobs or 10 jobs. I mean, is that really physically possible? It's mentally and emotionally exhausting if you think about that, versus when you start to delegate. So the more you can delegate, the faster you know what you needed to delegate because you don't like it or you hated that part of your business. Find someone that love it, because then you infuse your container with a lot of love, and everybody loves to work when they're appreciated and when they are actually in that type of space. I hope that helps that specific comment or question. Any oh yes, Teddy said you're absolutely correct. I need to learn to let go and delegate. Yes, yes. So just a little nutshell, okay? So if you are a 6-figure business owner making 100 to 500,000, I noticed that you actually can make that much money when you take massive imperfect action, right? However, if you really want to get to 7 figures, which is a millionaire and higher, you need to learn to delegate and early on know what to delegate. Because when you get to that mindset and you're, I mean, I'm good at something, but I'm not good at everything, right? Dave, you know that.
Oh yeah.
So we're all good at something. So find the ones that also excel in what they do and hire those people.
But, and I kind of think of it as how, I could, if I have a problem with my computer, I could go on Google and watch YouTube videos and try to figure it out myself. But I said, is that really the best use of my time? I'd rather find somebody who's an expert in that area. I'll just pay them and just fix it, and then I can focus on other things. So, yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. Wow. Thank you so much. This is lots and lots of, okay, question. Do you do task and breaks in certain chunks of time, like 15 minutes or 30 minutes? Okay. That's a question.
I generally try to structure it that way. Sometimes I minimize interruptions as much as I can. That's generally my goal, but that's one area, honestly, that I'm working on. It's an area that I'm trying to improve on right now, because I find that the time blocking when I do it has been effective. I think right now I've made some shifts and taken on some different types of work, so it's throwing a few monkey wrenches into that. But I definitely agree with doing the chunks of time and focusing on one thing or another. It's an ideal I always shoot for.
Got it. So I'll answer that question, Rich, based on how women respond, right? So I have an emotional authority in my human design, which means my emotions can go up and down. And when I am calm, right, like the waters are calm, my emotions are calm, I think the best, like it's very clear at that time. So for me, it changes because in the morning, I meditate and do my self-care stuff that works for me before I start my day. So if I know that I have a 9 o'clock appointment, I would make sure that I have enough time to take care of me first, take care of my emotions, make sure it's calm, like the waters are calm, and then I can think clearly in my head when there is a response. So I don't know, for guys, sometimes that might not be the case. However, human design is human design, meaning you may have emotional authority, which means when you're emotionally upset or like depressed, you cannot make good decisions when the water is like that, unfortunately, right? Because you're thinking, oh my God, it's like you're in a ship in an ocean and everything is moving very big, or like, can you actually be relaxed when you're still, or when you're stressed out? Of course, it's when you're still. So for me, I needed that part of my day to make sure that I can be at the best CEO I can be for this particular business that I'm running. Like, that's how I run. So that might be more relatable to other women, maybe not for men. But then, that's my take on that. Right. Okay. One more comment. This is so much fun. Thank you, Dave. I love this. So the Pomodoro technique, excellent. Breaking down.
I have used the Pomodoro technique, and I do, yes.
Share with the audience what that is, so that everybody.
Well, at least my understanding of it, and I've heard different ways that it's been defined in terms of lengths of time, but sometime between, like I hear some people say 17 minutes or 15 to 20. Basically, the idea is that you designate a time, like a time block of a 15 to 20 minute segment, and single-mindedly work on one thing, turn off your phone, put it in do not disturb mode, and just focus on that one thing until you get to the end of that time block, and then take a break of usually somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. And the length of time I found is varied, but I know there's a book. I haven't actually read the book on it. I've just read a few articles here and there, but I have found that when I get those time blocks structured correctly, it's really good. It's a really good way of just getting in the zone and getting in the flow.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So let's share with the audience how they can get a hold of you again, Dave.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So my website again, it's dave-baldwin.com, and my email is dave@dave-baldwin.com. Don't forget the dash. It will not work without the dash, unfortunately. Someone else already grabbed that domain up. But then my phone number is 919-723-7916.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. This has been an awesome interview. And we love your energy. We love that you can actually create that structure for the audience, because sometimes that's all they needed. Even if you guys are avoiding the structure. Yes, Teddy, thank you for also watching the show. Great at providing relevant and information that's useful for our entrepreneurs and those that are transitioning from employee to entrepreneurship. So thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Dave, and thanks for our team back there creating all the production and all the comments. Thank you, Elle. Thank you, Sarah. We love you all, and next Wednesday we have another episode of My Spiritual Money RX. So stay tuned for that, for more fun and for more different experiences in your life that'll help your business grow and will help you grow with ease, grace, and flow. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye. So stay tuned for that, for more fun and for more different experiences in your life that'll help your business grow and will help you grow with ease, grace, and flow. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.